Thank you. So once again, thank you for the opportunity. We're really grateful to be able to share our experiences and learnings with you today. Our presentation will be a mix. So the front section will be a PowerPoint presentation providing you with some important context and a little bit of background about Reimagining a Rebuild and the program. And then Marcella and I will have a little bit of a mini TED talk. So with you, so a chat about some of the key learnings before we break into groups, and you have an opportunity to explore what this might mean for you or how you might be able to apply this in your current role or future roles. So we hope you enjoy our presentation. Let's get started. So as many of you will already be aware, June 9, 2021 was the day that a significant storm event impacted Victoria and very much impacted the Yarra Ranges. Yarra Ranges was one of the most significantly impacted shires, and specifically that within the Dandenong Ranges. Over that 12-hour period, over 1,000 properties were impacted by fallen trees and storm debris, and over 5,000 were actually impacted by flood.
Well, we had 180 properties which were assessed for the planning and rebuilding team. Of those 180 properties, 79 were deemed uninhabitable, and really 80% of those properties had really complex repairs and rebuilds. The complexity came around about from the planning controls, having bushfire management overlay, erosion management overlay. These were not sewage size, septic, drainage, so there were multiple factors which made the repair and rebuilds really complex for people to tackle.
So that's a little bit of background about what happened on that night, and then from there, the Recovery Directorate, the Temporary Recovery Directorate, was stood up. But before we go into and explore what Reimagining a Rebuild is all about, let's just take a moment to kind of give you set the scene in terms of where we sat and how we work together. Yeah. So what you'll see here is just a snapshot summary of our Recovery Directorate, and the most important components of that in this presentation, alongside community always being at the ground in terms of the touchstone of everything that we do, is that myself in my community recovery role
and planning and rebuilding,
we're in separate teams. So we work within the one directorate, but given COVID and given our separate teams, we really had not met. No. We had not spoken. We were hearing about what the Built and Natural Recovery team are doing, and you were probably hearing about what we were doing, but we hadn't come together. So our roles were quite distinct. And whilst that is traditionally the way that recovery can roll in a LGA and some organisations, it's not how residents see it. It's not how community experience it. So one of the key things we wanted to do was actually come together. So after I think over about 150 days of lockdown, mind you, the lockdown ended on June 10, 2021, so the morning of the storm impact. But we were able to bring together our first community recovery hub event, our first live event. You can see some of us there, including Linda as well, and Marcella and a number of our team. So that was our first live, and that was the first time we met.
It was the first face-to-face. You were very busy with setting up community and just sitting aside, and I guess myself sitting aside from planning. I guess, how do I fit in? But being there available for the community, which was ultimately fantastic, to be able to see different people from different parts of the organisation coming to assist the residents.
Yeah. And the great thing was we invited the planning and rebuilding team because on the ground we knew that community were starting to ask questions, and even if they weren't ready now, they were going to need that support very, very soon. So we wanted to make sure that the human connection, the relationships were there with the planning team. And I suppose inherently in a council environment, it's not perceived from a resident's perspective that the planning people come out from behind the computer or the phone. So we wanted them out on the ground. And
Well, I actually did make connections with a couple of residents on the day saying, look, this is what I need to do. And I said, certainly that's not a problem, but at least they knew who to approach. So, that was great to have that human connection and engagement.
And we knew from there that was a great start. We had 78 residents turn up to that first event, and even though it was raining, it was very warm and welcoming. So what we actually did from there was we realised that we were looking for ways to connect and support our residents moving forward as they started to actually face the realities of rebuild and complex repairs. And out of that, we thought, well, okay, what have we got to work with? Even before the conception of Reimagining and Rebuild, we knew, we talked initially that, and some of the team and Linda and some of our managers had talked about maybe an expo happening.
Yeah. You wanted to engage, we wanted to engage.
And we thought, well, hang on, an expo is probably not a good fit for our community. We need something a little bit more intimate and a little bit more aligned to the community needs and circumstances. And so with my experience and your knowledge and a few other things, we actually came together and worked on bringing together the program. So what did we have to work with? Well, first of all, of course, we had our community and our residents, and we knew that we had a significant number of residents and community that were trauma impacted by this event. We knew that we had, over 180 families that were impacted in terms of their properties. Many of these residents were displaced. We also knew that there was some hesitation in the community about reaching out to planning. Planning's probably not the most popular team at a barbecue talking about things. So there's some hesitation in that, and we think, okay, so knowing that, how do we ensure that we create an environment that residents are willing to step into
and be safe and
heard? Yeah, exactly. So we knew that more and more residents were going to ask about planning, and we knew that we needed to do that and be aware of that. So that was our absolute touchstone the whole way through the program. So in terms of me, what did I bring? Trauma-informed practice understanding. So I've got that experience there. I live in the community, so I had extensive local knowledge and also some existing relationships that we could leverage to be able to get a first step in and start talking to people about this process and seeing if they'd be interested in attending. I've got a facilitation background and also an instructional design, so I'm used to building programs, so we could lean into that. And most importantly, I had absolutely no knowledge whatsoever of the planning or rebuild process. So that was okay. That was kind of what I needed, and where I was starting was where most residents would be.
That's right. I guess obviously my background was in stat planning, and that's what I brought to the partnership. So I was looking at a way of engaging with the community, and that's really your strength there. So through the fundraising that we received from the state government, we were able to create this rebuild support service with the community. We had consultants as well as the events that we'll speak about as well. We didn't really have much concessions to give the community. All that we had was the known advertising period in the planning process, so that really wasn't a great help. We didn't have any rebates that we could offer residents. The only thing that council at this point was doing was waiving application fees. So anyway, but also we were trying to make it as easy as possible to go through the planning process for their rebuilds. And also what I brought was the experience that I had working with the residents during the 2009 bushfires. And I understood what was happening and the state of mind that these residents were in and the care that we needed to take when they were going to approach the rebuilding phase.
Yeah. And so together, because there were some things that we couldn't change in planning. We couldn't change the permits and the reports that would be required, but we could impact how people work through that process and shorten the length of time once the applications were in. So there's a lot that we could do holistically.
And you learned a lot through that process.
I did. So let's get to the gold. Yes. So we call it the gold. Yes. And the goal was that intangible, and that was our desire and our passion to collaborate. We knew that we could actually strengthen each other by coming together. We've never had an argument.
No,
we haven't. We've had robust discussions. Yes.
Pulling her back in sometimes.
And pushing you back out
That's right.
sometimes. So we had the commitment and the passion to actually get it right. We actually built a real trust in each other. And I think initially we were both so driven. We knew that we had to get this right for our community. So whilst you know, sometimes it might have taken a bit longer, we didn't have the luxury of that. We had faith and support from our leaders. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Alison. So, and I think they saw our passion and they trusted in us, our ability to be able to bring this together. We had attention to every detail. Yes.
Very important. I mean, once they saw what we were doing, they really just gave us freedom, which was absolutely, that was our goal.
Yes. Yeah. Attention to detail, bit of a perfectionist, probably not the best thing to have as an ability under pressure, but we worked through it. And our gold, our real gold was Dr. Rob Gordon. So, and we'll explain a little bit more about where he comes in. So what were some of the challenges that we actually had? Well, we had community hesitation, and that was totally understandable given the trauma that they'd experienced, but also in any community, there's the hesitation to reach out to council. Probably, I'm sure the Hills aren't the only place where probably there's at least 50% of properties that have some part of it built without a permit, and no one's in a hurry to go to planning.
You know, those homes have been there for, 70 years potentially, and it's hard to think about rebuilding what you've lost.
Yeah, exactly. So we knew that we had that, and we were working with. We knew we had tight timelines. So not only timelines for the funding, so we had initially 12 months.
Not even 12 months. It really came at the end of January.
Yeah.
And it was really meant to be finished in December. We were lucky enough to extend that to June 30, 23. Yeah. But it was really much a really tight time frame to providing all these services, reaching out to the community. So
we did that. So, and in terms of those timelines also, just to give you a context, so Marcella and I first met in November 21, I think it was, 2021. And then we came together on the 16th of February to actually start going, okay, let's pull this together. Our manager said, okay, go and play. And we then worked through like exploring and working with each other. So we started that, I think, February 16th, and we ran our first workshop on March 19th. And that was building from scratch. That was everything. So that was the materials, the resources,
venues, the people,
bringing in all the partners, getting the community ready. Not something I'd recommend to do in 4 weeks, but we did it, and it was good.
We did. It was
okay. And we knew we only had one chance to get it right. So that was actually really important as well. So we couldn't actually make a mistake. In terms of where we focused and where we landed, we landed on the name of the program, Reimagining Your Rebuild. So in that program, there's 2 key parts to it. The first is around wellbeing and mental health for our residents. So looking at our residents holistically. And the second part
was to demystify the planning process or the rebuild process. I really didn't expect them to achieve that themselves. It was really for me an education piece, so they understood what their challenges were through that process. So, like I said, there were complex controls that they need to navigate. How do we help them make those decisions? That it is a complex process anyway, but when you're forced into it, as Deb said, it really makes it difficult.
Absolutely. These people weren't rebuilding out of joy and desire. That was out of absolute need. So
giving them the guidance and the knowledge that they needed to get through it.
And not giving anything. This was probably our most robust discussions. Not telling them anything they didn't need to know that someone else could actually help them with. Sure. So it was, how do we actually share this information? Because we know that residents, after any community, any human beings after a disaster, their ability to take in new information is limited. So how do we keep it simple? Okay. So bringing all the pieces together. So it wasn't just about actually, so we started on 16th of February, had our first brainstorming workshop, Marcella and I. We won't show you the whiteboards. We can share them, but we started with the intent. So not about the content, keeping it human-centered. What was our intent? What do we want people, our residents, to actually feel, experience, take away, be with, hold on to moving forward. We looked at what the key elements of the workshop were. So we needed to share information. We needed to have resources. We looked at who we needed to bring on board. That included Rob Gordon, and we'll give you some more details of some of those other people later, so architects and planning consultants. And as we were going through it, we looked at, we knew we needed information. And Marcella, I remember, was saying, all the information is on the website. And I'm going, well, okay, I really don't understand this planning process. She said, okay, go on the website and try to navigate
what you can make of it.
Yeah, and learn. See how much I could learn as a resident. And what happened, 3 Nurofen and probably a bottle of wine later, I came in the next day and I went, no, I don't get it. And it's too hard. And do I really need to know that? So we actually started to look at how we could visually represent that. And we'll show you a little bit more about these journey maps that we came up with. And as a way to actually help simplify and demystify the planning process. So we, in terms of the consultants, the Rebuild Support Service consultants, we looked at actually ensuring that they had, and anyone who's going to help partner in our program had access to trauma-informed care training through Phoenix that we would provide for them, that we'd actually brief all of our consultants. And if they were doing a presentation, that we'd actually navigate with them and work with them. Some of the presentations we thought we'd kind of explained and explored, the opportunity that we were dealing with residents who were in, that we needed to be gentle and compassionate and just give them basic information. And sometimes we learned, okay, we might need to redo that presentation. But the learnings, and we'll share some of the learnings later, were amazing in terms of how some of our consultants and partners grew
through that process.
In that process. So it was really important that we got every detail right, from the invitation wording that went out to any communication to the plants on the table to
everything.
Absolutely everything right. Okay. So there was a lot to bring together, and we did all this in 4 weeks, and we still did our normal job.
Yes, on top of that.
So this wasn't full-time work for us. So it was a lot, and it was exciting. Yeah. Let's get moving. Okay, so what is Reimagining a Rebuild? Well, it's primarily a 1-day workshop initially, and that is, there's two types. There's the Reimagining a Rebuild for those residents that are completely rebuilding from scratch. And there's also Reimagining a Repair. So for those residents who don't require a planning application, but who are
still need to go through repairs and through the building process. So I'll explain that later. The difference between the two.
And we had small groups of residents, somewhere between 12 to about 16 residents. And we also had our consultants and anyone, so whether it be our GA tech or our septic guy or even Rob, sit at the tables with the residents. There was no separate staff table or anything like that. And they would actually connect with the residents all day. There was also 2 follow-up events that we ran, and that was a Reconnect lunch. And that Reconnect lunch was with the same group who had done the 1-day workshop. So we were bringing residents through as a mini community. And that Reconnect was always a welcoming session. We'd welcome residents, then there'd be a session with Rob Gordon, and he would continue on. It'd be a follow-on session with Rob, sharing some insights, capturing some tips and tools and ideas, and reinforcing key points from discussions he'd had with residents about looking after your wellbeing, knowing where you're going to be at. There was no new information that we shared at these Reconnect events. This was an opportunity to
reconnect amongst themselves and engage, and just to share their experiences of where they're at that particular point in time.
And an opportunity to check in as well. So we could check in and like sustain and deepen that connection. So build that social capital with our community in a very gentle way. If we had new information, or if we had a program that we thought, like healing in our gardens, or another resource, or some updated information on insurers, it might be in reinsuring, how to do better, then we would actually cover that as well. So, but it was a great way. And then at the very last event was where we brought all our residents together. Okay. So we're just going to very, very briefly walk through like the process.
The process, and how we actually, and what we did within those events.
Yeah. So we would always look at creating a really relaxed and welcoming local environment for residents. So each of the events were held actually in the hills. So for us, they were in the community in that area. For many residents, this would be the first time they were coming back up to the hills since the night of the storm, because they'd been displaced. So we had to be really mindful there. But we wanted to make sure that it was healing and soothing. And we had one resident say it was like walking into a healing retreat and a very safe place to be. So thank you. That was our reminder. Okay. So in terms of, we always had Rob Gordon at each of our events. And that was great. And he really
settled people, really settled people, make them felt safe, and then really open to be what the next part of the event was. So
yeah,
that was really great to have that opportunity to people for Rob to make them understand where they were at.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that was really powerful. We saw residents shift. We saw residents shift from coming in quite uptight and quite anxious to actually being able to breathe for the first time. So
and connect and share. I mean, when they were at that safe spot, they were able to open up to other residents who they hadn't connected or didn't even know, who were living next door to them.
Yeah. So we also had psychosocial support at all the events. So we had case manager support who were working within our community from either Windermere, Anglicare or Red Cross. And we always tried to make sure that the case support officer who was working with our residents was actually at that event with the residents. So there was someone that residents knew if they needed at any point to take a moment or need additional support. So opportunity for social connection. We had great food, great location, and we gave residents time to chat. I mean, this photo is actually in the workshop, but there were so many opportunities. Our workshops would always finish on time or about 5 minutes over, but
they stayed on.
They stayed. Our residents, they stayed sometimes for up to an hour just chatting with each other and being able to feel heard for the first time, and that they weren't alone.
I won't just talk to us.
No, that's true. That's true.
So also for the event, we also made sure that we had tailored information for the residents actually to take away. It really helped for them to be able to read this in their own space. So just covering the topics that we had on the day. We did cover things like obviously, biodiversity or, the bell or the erosion management overlay. So there were a couple of things there that, obviously we wanted them to have available for them to consider.
And each of those documents was actually revised and reviewed through a trauma-informed lens. So we took out anything that we felt wasn't needed. There was also experts that we had there on the day.
That's right. So we had our planning consultants that they were able to connect with, and to council paid for the consultants to run their application. We had the team there. They were able to recognise and connect. We had architects there as well. So they gave them an opportunity to think about how they might rebuild or what the opportunities were. And again, we had the other specialists there, consultants for the bushfire management overlay, the erosion management overlay, and also we had our septic and drainage people, environment people there. It was really interesting. At the end of the day, one of the most popular person to speak to was our health guy in terms of septic. So it was, it's funny sometimes what you think, what people need and what don't need.
Yeah.
But that was not really nice that people felt that they had the opportunity to speak to these people, because often you don't get to speak to those people in advance.
Face to face. So this was all a face-to-face, very relaxed experience. And there was opportunities to kind of reconnect with those residents as well.
I think we'll just move on with this. Yeah. So this is really, I guess, where Deb and I had great fun with these journey maps. It really was to demystify the planning and the building processes. So there are two processes here. First is usually the planning process, where you need to get to that before you can move on to the building process. So with the planning process, we were trying to identify that on that journey, there are actually a lot of blockages that occur along the way. In preparation of the application, we wanted to front load the whole process for people. So by the time it came to planning, it was really much almost a tick box, approval, where we wanted to identify what the issues were. We didn't want any surprises when it came in. We worked really hard with consultants. And ultimately, we were able to we've issued planning approvals within, 20 and 30 days once it's come into us, because we've done all that hard work at the beginning or, prior to the application coming to us.
Yeah. And when we say front load the application, from a council perspective, really, council's role comes in once the planning application is submitted. And what we wanted to do was actually help residents either with a planning consultant, a RSS planning consultant, or with the knowledge to know how they could actually navigate that journey on their own, and know what each of the steps were. So look, this slide, this map is not something for you to have a read at in detail now, but hopefully you'll see, that there's these referred to opportunities to come and connect and be together. This looks at, there might be some roadblocks. So you might have one permit and environmental.
Saying why, saying one thing that conflicts with another thing. So the consultant's able to bring those together and work through those issues. Because just because you've got reports doesn't mean that's it. They have to work with each other and connect and understand what it is.
And part of that process was that we wanted to make sure in this journey map, so that wasn't just about reports. It wasn't just about, what you needed to do, but it was the questions you needed to consider, tips to actually help guide you on this process. And also in the repair. So whilst Yarra Ranges Council doesn't issue building permits, in our shire, if someone needs a building permit, they need to go to a private building surveyor. We wanted to be able to provide that extra layer of support and guidance in terms of what they could expect and what they need to look for and what they should be asking their building surveyor and what they need to submit.
Well, often they come back to us and say, why am I having problems here? Why can't I get an answer here? So, this was because this is the stage 2 of the approval stage.
So the idea of that is also what we found is that some of the residents actually struggle with private building surveyors, because so many people need a building surveyor, so many disasters happening across the state and still do become our new normal, that those kind of resources are limited. So our residents didn't always get the best one. And then the last element is really just about people having the ongoing support and advice. So do you want to just share a minute on that before we...
Generally, that ongoing support's still occurring. We are, we've made ourselves available. We'll go out on site. We'll connect with external agencies. We have agreements with them for, to provide feedback in a timely manner. We're still always connecting with the community recovery team to ensure that, because they'll have knowledge of what's happening out there where I won't necessarily, but working together, we're able to work through whatever solutions that we need to find for residents.
And now there's a number of us, including myself, and whilst it might not be traditionally my lane, but I can answer some basic planning questions about what might be needed or where to go and where to ask, which means that our residents are actually not having to speak to 5 different people to get the answer. So it's building those relationships and that trust and consistency. So at the end of the presentation, we're just going to have a couple of minutes. We're just going to, hopefully, Catherine and Sally, we can borrow a couple of minutes. We just wanted to share a little bit about, how did we go and what did we learn? We've run so many of these workshops and actually shared some of this information with different groups, and bringing it into this time frame has been a challenge in itself, but one we are up to. So in terms of some of the things, so how it went and what we learned. So there's a couple of things initially. The resident feedback has been extremely positive, but it's not just the feedback, it's the fact that residents are now coming back and asking questions and actually seeking advice, or that they're speaking to other residents and saying, you need to actually just call council, just touch base, or they're sharing the resources that they got in these events with other residents. It's actually helping them out. So we know it's actually getting out to community.
I think we've built a lot of trust out in the community through this process. You know, they're not afraid to approach a planning, or myself and my planning team. So, you know, that was really nice to have that the comfort that they thought they'll listen, you know, they've felt heard, we'll support them. And often it wasn't just about a planning question, it could have been anything that they were struggling with that often come to us with. So that trust and that reputational, the goodwill that we created, I think was enormous.
And I think that it will actually pay it forward in the event of another disaster, or even in ongoing work. One of the beautiful things that we've seen come out of this is some of our partners that we've worked with. So our septic environmental officers and our geotechs and architects, and even our municipal building surveyors who have come along. So we brought in on the ride and said, come and join us and come and see these workshops. They experienced, Rob, they experienced the way we work together and our focus in a trauma-informed way. And we are now starting to see, it's so good, we are now seeing them apply trauma-informed practices and approaches in their BAU work. So it's not always easy to get to the top, you know, to the director or whatever, but you can actually start to change the way an organisation operates from within.
Really,
yeah.
Really, we were fortunate within this directorate that we could reach out to anyone, and they really understood what needed to be done to help the residents.
Yeah. So there's one of the things that we also learned is that it's financially not expensive at all to do.
No, it wasn't at all.
It's about $40,000 to run 7 workshops.
It was, but it wasn't really a lot given what we had to do and what we were trying to achieve. So it was really, and we were running on an oily rag.
Yeah,
pretty much.
But we didn't need it because it was a lot about a lot of it was coming together and creating the environment in that space, and we would facilitate those workshops. So we built a greatly improved social connection and a social capital with community. We have started to see the impacts of it within the organisation. I think you've learned a bit more about it, trauma-informed care.
Definitely. You know, it's really nice to feel that residents are safe in a regulatory space, you know, because they think, oh my God, why are you taking me through this? Or, you know, because process is a process. It wasn't about the process for the residents, it was about supporting them through the process.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
I think that, one of the other things we've learned is that there are challenges, not everyone will be on board. We didn't actually find that because we kind of brought them in. Must have been our magic. But
I think the people that we thought were hard to approach actually ultimately came to us because they needed the help and they knew that it was a safe place for them, that we would help them through it. You know, we did have one resident who was, no, I'm not going there, but eventually she came, we sat down with her, we went through the issues, and she really thanked us. So, yeah, I think that's really fun to have that feedback.
And one of the things I'll just say very lastly is that
yep, we're running out of time.
Is one of the things finally is that the success of these workshops is not necessarily about quantitative. It's not all quantitative. So it's not just about the number of residents that engaged a planning consultant or that came to our workshops. It's very much looking at residents on their overall journey and how they are travelling and how they are actually coming out of this process in a way that is, we're not re-traumatising, we're not re-impacting residents, and we're actually supporting and creating more resilient communities. So there's a lot of things we do, some things we do different, but we'll explore that another time. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Catherine. We know that we've gone over a little bit, so thank you everyone for your time. But what we'd like to do now is give you the opportunity to go into your breakout groups. And with everything that you have, with everything that you've heard, and with everything that we've actually, what you're noticing about how our teams work together, or how your teams might work together, just to explore how this might be able to be applied in your role or in your organisation. So the questions are, what have you heard? What are you noticing, or what did you notice about how we work together in this program? And how can you apply or take away some of this for your role and perhaps your organisation now or in the future? So if we go into our breakout rooms, and we'll have about 17 minutes for that, and then we'll come back and capture some of the key messages from the groups before we go. Thank you.